Hey, hey, hey. Time for another Out of This World story from rSpace. The smallest change in behavior, a sudden emotional distance, a new attachment to their phone, or the classic just a friend excuse. We've seen it all before. Today on rSpace, we don't spiral, we get revenge. Discovered my wife's secret getaway with her affair partner. I ruined her plans by showing up. If there's something that I hope most of you will never have to experience, it's this feeling of not knowing whether the person that you're with is being faithful to you or not. Honestly, the kind of anxiety that it has put me through is worse than any anxiety I've felt in my life. I'm constantly scrutinizing the things she does, and I'm also always keeping an eye out for her phone, hoping to get a chance to go through it without her knowing. After all, I might be wrong, but I really don't think I am. I wasn't so sure that I was going to bring my story here, but honestly, I think I might lose my mind. So, I have to rant somewhere. And it's going to be here. I'm hoping that the responses will tell me I'm overthinking things, but that's very unlikely. I think what's going on here is quite clear, and I might be the one in denial. Anyway, I'm a 27-year-old male, and I've been married to my wife, who is also 27, for just 2 years. That's part of what makes the whole ordeal pretty painful for me because even though I'm just working on suspicion, I'm starting to wonder if I might have done something wrong as a new husband. I know I shouldn't be thinking that way, but I genuinely can't help it. The first thing that started this entire mess was my wife suddenly seeming to be less emotionally available than usual. The first time that I noticed it, there was no issue with me asking her whether something was the matter because that was not how she was most of the time. However, according to her, nothing was the matter. It was very unconvincing when she said it though. A few days later, I had to ask because it was very clear that it wasn't her usual behavior. She said the same thing, and I started to hate her responses because it felt like I was being taken for a fool. I think it was the next day that I had to ask one more time, and that day, she seemed to be annoyed and responded by saying, "I told you I'm fine, okay?" At that point, I just decided to retract my concern, but it didn't mean I wasn't annoyed or that I really believed that nothing was up with her. For the next few days after that little outburst of hers, I chose to return the energy, and I started trying to be distant too. She never approached me to ask whether I was all right, but about 3 days after I changed my behavior, she returned to her normal ways. No conversation about what had been on her mind, and no referencing the way she had been treating me. It was quite annoying, to be honest, but I just let it go because I was done with her crap at that point and just wanted to move back to normal living. My suspicions came around pretty unexpectedly. I had gone to hang out with a few friends at one of their houses, and the conversation eventually got to a point where I was able to complain about how my wife had been acting all weird a few weeks before. One of them jokingly mentioned that her guy on the side might not have been giving her as much attention as she wanted, and we all laughed about it. But then he mentioned that he was only half joking. According to him, we underestimate how much emotional bandwidth women can put into affairs. He clarified that he wasn't saying with any certainty that that's what was going on with my wife, but he had seen it happen. Then, the conversation just moved on to other women's issues. However, by that point, I think a seed had already been planted in my head. I started to wonder whether there was another man, and why she had been acting unusually. I was under the impression that we told each other almost everything, but it clearly didn't seem like that since I was sure there was something going on in her life that she simply didn't want to tell me about. Plus, she definitely has more than enough time when I'm not at home or she's out to make cheating an actual possibility. As it is now, I'm really trying to find the balls to snoop through her phone. It's not something I've had to do before, and even though her phone's password is known to me, it's hard for me to take the plunge. We very rarely use each other's devices. I'm going to do it at some point, but I did think that I should ask what you all think about the situation and her mood changes. Is there some explanation I'm not considering, or should I just be thinking of cheating as the only explanation? Edit. I haven't checked her phone yet, but literally the night after posting this, she came back from work relatively late, acting kind of distant, and she claimed that she got stuck in traffic. It's not that that's entirely impossible since it happens here and there, but she almost always messages when she's stuck in traffic, so I understand why she's not back on time. Plus, the way she was acting just brought my mind back to those initial instances. Putting the two together, I'm suddenly fixated on her potentially cheating on me. I think at this point, I'm not going to be a wimp when it comes to checking her phone. The first chance that I get, I'm going for it, and I'll try to keep all of you updated on how it goes for me. Just wish me luck, I guess. I can't keep living this way. I feel like it's actually killing me inside. Listen, OP, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, chances are... Update 1. At this point, I totally see how people end up red-pilled. All it takes is one really bad experience with a woman, and it is easy to realize how hard it is to trust them. I think it is probably very clear that I have found something out, and all it took was me grabbing her phone when she was in the shower. When my wife and I chat over the phone, we typically use iMessage, so that was the first place I went to. The assumption was simply that she'd likely be chatting with an affair partner, if one existed there. Thankfully for me, it didn't take long before I saw a name that was pretty unfamiliar to me, and it was Josh. We've always been open with each other, or I guess I should say that I thought we had always been open, but I had never heard of anyone in her life called Josh. She had never mentioned him. When I went through the messages, it initially seemed fine, but it didn't take long for me to suddenly start worrying because I was seeing mentions of a room and a rental car. Scrolling up more, it became clear that there was a trip being planned, and initially, I refused to believe it involved my wife. Maybe Josh was the husband or boyfriend of one of her female friends, and they were planning a surprise. I couldn't have told based on the lower part of the conversation. However, all it really took was me scrolling back about a full week before all of the trip planning for me to see the part of their conversation history where they were flirting intensely with one another. As much as I hated it, I kept scrolling up, and it was getting worse and worse. It became evident that they had had something going for at least 2 months. And you know what's interesting? I referenced the first date that she started acting moody. That was what prompted me writing the previous post. And it seemed to align with a day that something might have happened between them, according to the chat logs. I wasn't able to get evidence at that point because she came out of the shower, but it really felt like my head was spinning. Everything that I thought I had had for this brief 2-year period is falling apart. Like, it has all been a lie. And that's crazy to me. You think that you have someone that has no interest in stepping out, but then you find out that not only is she having an affair, but she's planning a secret getaway with her affair partner. It's so crazy to me. Anyway, that night, I got the chance to go through her phone and take all of the evidence that I needed. Honestly, it was quite frustrating to have to go through all of that a second time. It's been a few days at this point, and I'm really trying to figure out how I'm going to handle this. Do I just confront her, scream and shout, and say that it is over? Do I cheat back? It just hurts that I'm feeling this much pain, and yet it feels like she's going to be okay at the end of it all, even if I divorce her. I hate this situation so much. If you guys have any advice for me, I promise that I'm reading all of the comments. Just let me know what you think that I should do. Edit. Thank you for all your support and suggestions. One of the most popular comments here said that I need to surprise her and her man on their getaway, and while their logistics might be tough to figure out, I think that might be the move. I just need to ruin everything for her. I need to let her know I know, in the worst possible way. Her trip isn't far off, so I'll surely be back with an update when the time comes. The trick is to make this so brutal that every time she sees a reflection, she has to blink away the shame. Trust me, when she's sitting alone, wondering how she lost everything over some forgettable fling, that's when you'll know you truly won. Update 2. I'm back, and I have to say that even though revenge didn't reverse the effects of my wife cheating on me, it felt really, really good, and I'm glad that I did it. I'm very glad that I did. Under my last post, some people suggested that I ruin her little rendezvous with her new man, so I decided that I was going to do that. For full context, about 2 weeks after I came across her plan, I found out that she and her affair partner were planning to go to New Orleans together. They were going to get a rental car, take a road trip out of state, and then lodge up in an Airbnb together. How very romantic. It's the kind of thing that I'd have loved to do with her, but it was clear she really wanted to do it with someone else. It's crazy. I had enough time to go through her phone and her emails to find the day her trip was meant to be, the Airbnb that she planned to stay in, and a little itinerary that she had prepared for the two of them. All I needed was to make sure that I was in the right place at the right time, and I'd figure out the rest. The most important thing to me was to make sure that I caught her in the act. I absolutely refused to give her the chance to lie or to try and explain things away. She let me know about a week before her trip that one of her old college friends was planning to have a baby shower, and she absolutely wanted to be there. She claimed that it would eat her inside if she didn't. If I didn't know what she was up to, I might have believed it. So when the day came, off she went to her bridal shower, and I acted like nothing was wrong. That part was easy enough. Once it was clear that she was on her way, she even sent me a picture of her in the rental car alone, though I obviously knew that it was just meant to throw me off her trail. As far as she was concerned, I was just the dumb husband who had no idea of what she was doing. Unlike her, My plans did not involve taking a road trip. I had already booked a flight, and it meant I was in New Orleans before she was. I had never been there before, so it seemed like I should have been sightseeing and all of that. But unfortunately, I was far from the mental state to be doing all of that. So, I just had to wait until the next day before I could do anything. According to the itinerary that I had seen, she was supposedly going to be at a spa with him so that they could unwind after their long trip. The next day, I video called her out of the blue. It took longer than usual, but she eventually picked up and she let me know that she had just gotten to the spa. I could tell that she was telling the truth in that regard based on the background that I could see. I told her I just wanted to see her face, and then after that, I was out the door. I knew the spa based on what she had sent to Josh, and when I got there, I could tell it was the same place. I hadn't actually thought about how I was going to handle things when I got there, and since she wasn't in the waiting room when I got there, I wasn't quite sure what to do. In my mind, I had expected that I'd walk in and see her. That was my bad. So, I decided to hang outside. Yes, I considered sitting in the reception, but I really didn't want her to see me before I saw her. It took about 2 hours before she and Josh walked out of the spa, and as soon as I saw that, I grabbed my phone and started to record. I walked up to her very casually, with no yelling or expletives or even visible anger. She looked at me as I approached her and looked away, and then she jerked back in shock. I think it took a bit for her to register it because there was no way she expected me to be in New Orleans. When I saw that, I just stood there and I refused to say a word. She had frozen in place, and the man she was with, Josh, I assumed since I didn't know what he looked like, looked very puzzled. I smiled at her, and I think she might have somehow erroneously taken that as me being welcoming in some way. She took a cautious step forward and tried to reach out for my hand, but I pulled away from her. At that point, I turned toward the other guy and said, "Hi, Josh." He returned it, but very cautiously. She seemed shocked that I knew his name. I think at that point she realized how much I knew, and it must have caught her off guard. "Babe," was the first thing out of her mouth. It felt like we had been there in silence for 5 minutes, though when I eventually watched the video, it was just under a full minute. I asked her who the guy she was with was, and she just stuttered. She eventually managed to call him a friend, and I was lucky enough to catch his quizzical look toward her when she said that. It seemed like he wanted to question her, but clearly she was in a messed up position and refused to interfere. At that point, I was tired of the drama. "Is this the baby shower you told me you were going for? Let's stop lying to each other. Just admit that you, a married woman, I can see you've conveniently lost your ring, drove over a few states to have a romantic getaway with this guy. Are you for real?" At some point, while I was saying that, she said, "Why are you recording this?" I didn't hear her say it until I watched the video much later, but it pissed me off. She asked Josh to head to the car, that she'd meet up with him, but he refused to budge. We were standing in the parking lot throughout this whole thing, and it didn't seem to deter her from trying to explain herself. She couldn't get past a few sentences before she started crying and begging. That was where the video ended, because I just walked off. She tried to call me, obviously, but I had no interest in picking her phone calls. At that point, it was weird, because I felt like I was in so much pain, but I felt numb at the same time. It's crazy that I realized that my marriage was about to fall apart, yet I decided to search up the best places to eat in New Orleans, and I didn't even feel like I was doing it as a cope. I just had to lock out everything about her while I was still in that city. I blocked her phone number too, since it was starting to pull me out of the safe zone I was trying to put myself in. Anyway, I finished making the best of my time in New Orleans as I could, and then I flew back. Oh, and I have to mention that the video I took ended up being sent to every single friend and family member of hers who I knew. I had to make sure they all knew that our imminent divorce had nothing to do with me, because it really didn't. It was saving me from blame, and it was embarrassing her. A classic win-win. When I got back to our house, she was back. Obviously, I had made sure her romantic getaway was cut short. She tried to beg all over again, but I told her there was no point, and I was glad that she just sat quietly after that. I packed all my things, and I was out of the house very soon after that. I got a divorce lawyer, got the papers written up, and had her served. Divorce processes don't make for compelling reading, but I guess as far as divorces go, this one was probably only a little rough. She didn't try to put up much of a fight, but her lawyer wanted alimony as well as paid rent in the apartment we had been living in for the next 5 years. That was obviously a joke, and it didn't happen. There was no issue with the apartment remaining hers, especially since I had already packed out. I was ordered to pay alimony for 3 years though, which drove me nuts. The only real thing I got from the mix was our shared car. It was good enough for me. Since then, we've only spoken based on things related to the divorce settlement. There was one night when I tried to get some of the stuff that I had left behind, and she was visibly drunk and trying to seduce me. Obviously, I rebuffed her hard. I didn't want anyone's sloppy seconds, and I actually told her that. That was the last time we were in the same physical space and the last time we talked at length. I'm glad that things are over. Quite genuinely. I've been through enough, and it's time to see if there's any way that I can rebuild my life. You didn't just expose her. You made sure there was no room for denial, no way for her to manipulate the narrative. And the fact that you sent the video to her friends and family? We love to see it. What's the best way you got revenge? Let us know in the comments. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time.